Elsewhere, in Baghdad on Monday, Iraqi security forces locked down areas around the infamous Abu Ghraib prison and another high-security detention facility on the outskirts of the city as well. They did this to hunt for hundreds of escaped inmates, including some of al-Qaeda's top militants, after a daring insurgent assault set hundreds of detainees free. Now, al-Qaeda has since claimed responsibility for the jailbreak. And the carefully orchestrated late-night attacks killed dozens on Sunday night, including at least 25 members of the Iraqi security forces. Insurgents fired dozens of mortar shells and detonated suicide and car bombs, drawing Iraqi forces into firefights that lasted more than an hour. Now, the two prisons attacked housed thousands of inmates, including convicted al-Qaeda militants. And exactly 1 year ago, al-Qaeda's Iraq arm started a campaign called Breaking the Walls, and that made freeing its imprisoned members a top priority. Here to discuss further is Saeed Erekat, a correspondent with Al-Quds and a former UN spokesperson for Iraq. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
Now, let's start off. How could a jailbreak of this scope actually happen?
It is a classic al-Qaeda operation. It was begun, of course, using suicide bombs, cars. So that is a classic al-Qaeda tactic. They also had, like you suggested, mortars, and they had militants attacking from different areas. They cut off the road. So it was well planned. It has probably been, weeks and months in the making. They have done it time and time again. It is a very well organized group of militants of al-Qaeda. They represent the al-Qaeda in Iraq, the Islamic State in Iraq and the Levant. So it was well coordinated, well funded, well armed, and if it proves anything, it proves that the al-Qaeda making a resurgence in Iraq.
Now, what kind of reaction are we seeing from people on the ground who just kind of went through this escape and experienced the escape, not went through it, but experienced the escape of more than 500 prisoners?
Well, it is a nightmare for the Iraqi security forces, no doubt about it, because when I was in Iraq, and as we discussed earlier, I was in Iraq for 5 years, between 2005 and 2010, and these jail breaks, they happen time and time again. Now, the security forces is also divided along sectarian lines. It is not very well disciplined, despite the best U.S. effort to really, train it and equip it and so on, and have it do itself in a professional way. So it is a nightmare. They claim that they caught some, but I suspect that the overwhelming majority are on the loose, and that means that they can reorganize and attack government facilities over and over again.
Okay. Now, this prison assault, it's followed some of the worst violence the country has seen since 2007, and you mentioned this earlier, but what does this say about the stability of the country and how it relates to al-Qaeda's resurgence?
Well, I think it has a direct tie or related directly to what is happening in Syria, because the armed flow and the ideological inclination of both, al-Qaeda, like Jabhat al-Nusra, and al-Qaeda in Iraq, they work very closely together, and the flow of arms into Syria also found its way into Iraq. So all these elements, work together. They militants have always been there. We have seen that Iraq's inability to reconcile itself and have national dialogue and national reconciliation has really fragmented the country, and so on. We had problems in the north with the Kurds. We have problems in the south, Basra and the Shia and Iran's influence, and then in Anbar, which is mainly Sunni. So you have the sectarian divide is getting wider and wider, and its ramifications are long.
Seems like it. Now, can you explain how Abu Ghraib has been used since its infamous time as a U.S. prison, and well, basically since Operation Iraqi Freedom, and who is currently operating the facility?
Well, the Iraqi security forces is operating it. The Americans handed it over to the Iraqis. Of course, we all remember the famous or the infamous pictures of people being tortured and so on, or led to believe that they were being tortured and so on for psychological effect. But it has always been notorious. Abu Ghraib has always been notorious. It was a place for torture under Saddam. It was a place for torture during the American occupation for a brief period, and it continued to be the same way after the Americans pulled out.
Right. Now, the U.S. We've spent billions of dollars in Iraq, and the country has seen some of the worst violence in its history in the wake of the war.
Right.
But it's not the only country where the U.S. has spent a significant amount of money while still alienating a majority of the population, which is what it's done in Iraq. Can you expand on this a little bit?
Well, first of all, it's the U.S. government focused on the military aspect of its occupation and not really on the civilian preparation and training and all these things. There was something called the PRTs, which is Project Reconstruction Teams. These project reconstruction teams failed miserably. They spent billions of dollars, and they would start something and never finish it, like schools, farms, factories, electricity. Look at Iraq today. It is still, it has like 3 or 4 hours of electricity a day. Water is scarce. Basic services are scarce. The health industry is really collapsed and so on. So instead of focusing on these aspects of reconstructing Iraq, they focused mainly on creating a
Akarat, a correspondent with Al Quds.